Hello, AECN 141ers. Let's talk about monopolistic competition and move on to oligopoly. So this is one of those times where I miss having the opportunity to be in class with you for an extended period of time, because it really is fun to think about monopolistically competitive markets, because that's where you probably spend your most time as a consumer. If you think about the products that you buy, blue jeans, t-shirts, even contact solution. I just had to order some on Amazon. Those things are all differentiated, sometimes in meaningful ways and sometimes not in meaningful ways. So I want to talk about two things with monopolistic competition, and then we'll move on to oligopoly, and then we'll be done at least listening to me for the day. Okay, so number one, monopolistic competition outcomes. And number two, an economic concept called rent seeking. So these are our two objectives for monopolistic competition. Let's start off with our long run outcomes. So our model of monopolistic competition graphically is identical to a monopoly. Monopolistically competitive firms aim to carve off a niche. The word you see, it was one of these hot button words probably 15 or 20 years ago. I'm still not 100% sure it's niche, 99% sure. Some people say niche. I think they sound like people who say foyer instead of foyer. So I'm going with niche. What these firms try to do is they try to carve off part of the market, and they try to create their own kind of tiny monopoly. They have a marginal cost curve that is their supply curve that shows increasing marginal cost. And they do exactly what a monopolist does. Their cost here compared to the price, this difference is what's known as markup. That's how much market power they have. They want to keep that market power because this represents some type of profit. Now, what we don't have in this analysis at this point is total cost. Now, the marginal cost of production, that's those direct costs, the variable costs. How much does it actually cost to add more production? But it doesn't include overhead or fixed costs or indirect costs. Those things are all synonymous. I'll say them again. Overhead, direct costs, and fixed costs. Doesn't include those. And they become especially important when we're talking about monopolistically competitive markets because of what might happen in this example. So let's think about something that could follow this trend. Let's say that it is, I don't know, fidget spinners. You guys are young enough that you may have actually pestered your parents to buy you a fidget spinner, or you bought one yourself. And those fidget spinners were $10, $15, $20. Now, we know now that the cost of producing a fidget spinner is next to nothing. It's just plastic and a bearing or a bushing. So the markup above that material cost, that direct variable cost, is great. So firms have this tiny monopoly for some amount of time, and they can sell fidget spinners for $10. But what happens is other firms enter into the market, and as supply increases, the price goes down. Unless the firms that have this market power say, I want to keep that market power. And the way that they keep that market power is by advertising, research and development, investing in keeping their market power. And if they do that, they keep this little mini monopoly, they keep their niche carved off, they're going to keep this ability to price above marginal cost, but the cost to them to keep their cost is that their average total cost curve goes up. And if you remember, average total cost is your total cost divided by output. And this is much, much higher than what my marginal cost is. And the reason why it's much higher than marginal cost and much higher than average variable cost, if we included this, is because to keep their market power, they're investing in things and they're spending money on things that don't actually add to input or that don't actually add to production. If you think about the beer industry is fantastic when it comes to monopolistic competition and oligopoly. If you think about the cost of producing a case of Natural Light, Busch Light, Bud Light, Coors Light, Busch Light, all of these kind of light American lagers that college students tend to drink, if you start thinking about, well, what the cheap beer versus the more expensive beer, the actual cost of production is identical. But what makes Bud Light more expensive? It's the fact that they have to advertise. If you advertise, does that change the cost of actually producing a can of Bud Light? No, but it does change the overall cost if I'm spending millions of dollars on Super Bowl commercials. So the long run outcome of monopolistic competition is you lose that economic profit in the long run. You're either going to lose it because you've added all of this cost on the front end in terms of ownership costs or fixed costs, or you allow the market to infiltrate your little fiefdom, your little niche, and your demand curve starts pitching this way, and it becomes a perfectly competitive market. So in either case, the long run outcome for monopolistically competitive firms is zero economic profit. So that kind of should leave you thinking, well, what good is it? Why would we want monopolistic competition if what firms are actually doing is charging prices much greater than their actual cost of production? And in the end, they lose their market power anyway, or they end up just wasting money on advertising. Well,